So this time around, I think the two biggest challenges I had with this drawing was number one, getting back into the groove of drawing. And I know I said this probably in a past video, in the last couple of videos, but I still have a lot of trouble just finding the motivation to draw, which I think is the most important thing, is getting started. And number two was with the pattern of the swimsuit. Going back to number one, back when I was drawing regularly, I could just sit down and I could draw anything. It didn't matter whether I knew anything about the series. It was just something totally off the wall, something somebody suggested to me that I had really no interest in. I could draw it no problem. It didn't really matter to me, the subject matter. But now the subject matter matters to me a lot. If I'm not interested in a show, if I don't like the character, if I'm not interested in the motif or the particular technique that I'm trying to do with it, I just cannot find the motivation to sit down and draw at all. I have no idea why. I can just sit here, I'll sit on my computer and be like, I really should be drawing this because this is like my defined list of goals, but I'm like, I just don't really have any motivation to do it. So that's something that I'm trying to slowly get back into the groove of. And I think it's just I need to have a string of successes, and then I can be like, okay, I'm back on track and I can do it. And I know this makes absolutely zero sense from a logical standpoint. It's like, if you just want to draw, just draw. I'm sorry, I'm just a human being and we're stupid. The other thing that I had a lot of trouble with this one was on the pattern. And usually in the past when I've used patterns on clothes, it's a very kind of superficial pattern. It kind of just blends in with the mid-tone that I chose for the color to begin with, or for the clothes to begin with. This time around, it was a little different because the pattern didn't repeat. It was all sorts of different colors. And you can see here, it kind of sort of blends in with the dark blue background that is on the swimsuit, but it's not quite there. And it's not simple enough where I could just shade each individual piece of the pattern individually. And that's why I had to use a multiply layer for the shade and a screen layer for the highlights. And it's just really tough to get the color right. And I actually cut this out, but when I was working in Photoshop, I played around with all sorts of different blending modes and all sorts of different layer effects and things like that to make the shading work the way that I wanted to. In the end, I really couldn't get it where I wanted it to be, but I just gave up. The thing that I really liked about doing this one was that there was a lot of skin for me to shade. I mentioned this before, but skin is just really interesting to me just because it has the right amount of detail for me. It's not too much and not too little. Like, for example, hair, for me, has a little bit too much more detail than it's a little too tedious to draw and to shade, especially here because the hair is like floating in the water, so it's like going all over the place. But skin and clothes too, I think, also have the right amount of detail. So just as soon as I get bored with one detail and I finish it, I barely have to move over in the canvas and I can see the next part that I should tackle. And it just helps to drive me forward. Whereas with something like hair or anything else that has a lot of detail, and I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Oh, so maybe something like shoelaces or like a corset where the strings go back and forth. I can be working on the same piece of the canvas for a long time and I won't be done with it. And you can see here, I'm taking forever to do the hair. I'm just looking at the same piece of hair over and over and over again. Skin is just interesting. It has the right amount of detail. The other thing that sucks about hair is that usually anime hair is not real colors. So I can't even remember the last time I saw somebody with a full head of bright pink hair. And that's just really hard to do when there's no real world reference for it. So at this point here, I'm doing the shading for the swimsuit, and this goes back to what I was saying. The shading just doesn't look right. So I removed the pattern because it was just getting distracting trying to shade that way. and I couldn't tell where the light and the dark really was. So I tried to get rid of it, but in the end I couldn't really. And so at this point I was just kind of thinking like, maybe I should just not have the pattern and just go with just a solid color route over the pattern. But then later on I thought about it and I'm like, you know, half the point of me doing this is just so that I can experiment with the pattern and try to get it right. So in the end I put the pattern back in, but it's just, you can see here I'm moving a lot faster when I don't have the pattern on, because I can actually tell and see what's going on. There's a very strong, you know, sharp contrast between light and dark here. Whereas when you put the pattern down and it's a busy pattern like that, it's really tough to tell this is where the light portions are and this is where the dark portions are. There's not that sharp contrast. You can still see it, but it's not as apparent. Another thing that I had a little bit of trouble with was with the highlights of the skin. Obviously there's a lot of skin to cover in this picture, but I chose a really light mid-tone for the skin. So then, yeah, here I changed the highlight to orange just so that I could see it. And because the mid-tone was already so light, it didn't really help. You know, you can't really see the highlight too much, but I think it still added a little bit, but it wasn't strictly necessary 100%. I really did add a lot of, I don't know how to put it, but a lot of depth into the skin shades. And going back to the hair being annoying, highlights and hair are just annoying. I probably complained about this before, but this is really, really annoying for me. I used to be able to do it no problem, but I can never, I've only maybe once or twice in the past 2 or 3 years, I felt like I've done the hair highlights really well. Every other time I'm like, I just did good enough. Ever since I took the time to actually start rendering out the face a little bit more and put in blush, put in shading on the lips and all that sort of stuff, and shading in the mouth and on the teeth and everything like that, and even in the eyes a little bit, I feel like that's really paid off because I felt really comfortable doing it in this particular picture. I think it's one of the few times that I've actually felt really comfortable and I felt like I knew what I was doing here. Usually I struggle with making the shape of the lips exactly right, and this is like a total hindsight thing, but I think that I still could have done some pieces of the lips a little bit better. But overall I was pretty happy with it, and that's kind of a rarity for once, is that I actually liked the way that the face came out. It was actually a little funny because I liked the way that the face came out this time, but I'm not too happy with the overall proportion of the body. I'm happy with a lot of the individual pieces and details in the body, but overall I didn't feel like everything came together the right way. Usually I find that I don't do well on the face and I do really well on the body. I think that I just wanted her body to be a little bit longer. And right now, if you flip the canvas 90 degrees clockwise, you can see it's a little bit longer than I don't know. But with that being said, I'm really happy that I was able to finish this and get to a place where I'm at least happy with it. So with that, I'll talk to you guys in the next one.